Post-dinner speaker is Associate Clinical Professor at Northwestern University Law School. He received his BA with distinction from Cornell University and his JD cum laude from Northwestern in 1988. After a federal clerkship, he joined the staff of the Texas Capital Resource Center, where he represented people on Texas's death row. He later entered private practice in Minneapolis, specializing in civil rights and capital defense. He was the counsel of record in Russell versus Bush, which involved the detentions at Guantanamo Bay, and Habib versus Bush, which involved a rendition case. This was the first case to reach the Supreme Court with respect to Guantanamo, and he won it. Joe has played a leading role in coordinating litigation nationwide, challenging the Bush administration's post-9/11 detention policy. He is the author of Guantanamo and the Abuse of Presidential Power and has won numerous awards for his work since 9/11. And if I may just interject a personal note as to how I discovered Joe, a couple years ago I was traveling to Europe and I needed something to read because I don't sleep well on flights. So I decided to buy this book. Looked interesting, Guantanamo and the Abuse of Presidential Power, and it didn't matter whether I could sleep or not because I could not put this book down. This is one of the greatest books I have ever read, and it's easily readable. It's the best encapsulation of the rendition policy, the Guantanamo situation, everything that I've come across even since then. And what struck me most about the book was that as you were reading through it, and especially at the end, you could capture that this was a man of passion and commitment that was truly, truly concerned about the future direction of this country. And so we invited him to speak at last year's conference, and he was a magnificent hit, and it was a real pleasure and an honor that he accepted our invitation to return. Please receive Joseph Margulies.
Good evening. I have to say, I approached my task this evening with no small amount of humility and trepidation, not least of which is, not simply because of those remarks, but also because of the circumstances here. When they emailed me the schedule, I dutifully printed it out, and I kept, like one does, I kept looking for my name. And I'm looking through the first day, and I'm not there, and I see all these extraordinary speakers and extraordinarily important folks, and I know they're good speakers. And then I turn the page, and there's the next day. Well, surely I'll be and I'm not on that either. And then finally, it's the last day. Well, and I'm the last person on the last day. And then I come here, and Stephanie says, you know, we're having you speak after dinner, and so everybody's going to have already heard 21 other speeches, and by the way, they're going to be drinking at dinner, and they're really, you know, there's something wrong with the air. It's kind of warm in there, and by the way, you're following Bruce Fine. I thought, you know, I just got to start giving more money to the shul or something. I'm obviously not. I'm not living right. I don't, what did I do? Okay, I'm sorry for whatever. You know, and then I ran into a couple folks, you know, when I got here late last night, and they came up to me and they said, Mr. Margulies, it's so good to see you. I saw you last year. Last year you were terrific. It was wonderful to hear what you had to say. And, you know, my wife is in labor. My daughter's graduating from Ole Miss. I really shouldn't be here, but I came to stay for your talk. Go home. I'm very happy to be here. I want to chat with you a little bit, and really just briefly. And I want to introduce my talk to you this way. I want to talk about the person that all of Washington loves to hate. He may be the most vilified man in Washington, D.C. right now, certainly the most vilified man in politics. And of course, I'm talking about Dick Cheney. He has the lowest approval rating, even lower than the president's approval rating. He is a campaign pariah. They can't keep him far enough away from anybody who's running for office. And every time he opens his mouth, it only gets worse. You guys remember, I'm sure, his response when a journalist from ABC News said to him, over half of Americans disapprove and have come to think that the war in Iraq was a mistake. And his response was to say, so? And recently he just had some quip about West Virginia that they now actually think West Virginia may go Democratic, thanks. Well, my thesis is a controversial one, and I want to suggest to you that Dick Cheney may possibly go down in history as the most successful vice president in U.S. history, at least if success is measured by achieving one's goals. His goal, I think, as you got a sense from Bruce Fine's remarks, was to transform executive power, transform the architecture of executive power in a lasting way. And he never made any secrets about this. It's not as though this is some sort of stealth move. He told reporters aboard Air Force Two once that his vision of executive power was captured in the Minority Report after the investigation of the Iran-Contra affair. And he was the author, or one of the authors, of the Minority Report, and he said, that lays out my vision, what I think the executive ought to be. And he's been perfectly upfront about this. And the idea was to restore a robust idea of executive power as he conceives it, partly through his historic lens, that he thinks was captured best by President Nixon. And he has tried to do this through two vehicles. There's no mystery here either. The first, as Bruce discussed, is the war. And when I say the war, I don't mean the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq, as disastrous as it is, as catastrophic as it is, as much of a fiasco as it is, as much as we will suffer for decades to come, and as much as we all feel the sting of brothers and sisters who have died there and the thousands of Iraqis who have died there, the Iraqi conflict does not fundamentally alter the architecture of executive power. What I'm talking about and what Bruce was talking about is the so-called war on terror. And fundamentally, the perspective that differentiates the Bush administration from the Clinton administration with respect to the war on terror is the difference between crime and war. The difference between responding to the threat of transnational terror as a crime versus responding to it as a war. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't illustrations in both administrations that are counterfactual, but as a general matter, their approach in the Bush administration is to conceptualize transnational terror as a military problem that requires a military solution. And the fundamental conceptualization of the Clinton administration was to think of it, conceive of it, and respond to it as a crime. And that has extraordinarily important implications. Let me just give you some examples. The examples are known to us all. Again, there's no mystery to this. For instance, the interrogation program. Well, fundamentally, the approach of the Clinton administration was to use interrogators trained and employed by the FBI. They were FBI interrogations built in order to, or conducted in order to build a case that you would later present in an Article III court, in a federal court. So these interrogations were girded with a set of protections that made them defensible in court. And we know that that has changed post 9/11. They are now conducted principally on a military or CIA model where you don't need to, or you perceive that you don't need to gird them with those protections because you may never introduce the fruits of this in court. It is a military model of interrogations or an intelligence gathering model versus a law enforcement model. Another, as Jacob mentioned, is the rendition program. And of course, the rendition program during the Clinton administration principally was the idea of grabbing people in a third country and bringing them into the criminal system. So Bruce mentioned Ramzi Youssef, the architect of the first World Trade Center bombing. He was picked up in Pakistan and flown by the FBI. During the flight, he was interrogated at length using FBI-sanctioned interrogation methods.